Hello, everyone. So, as I've been nicely introduced, my name is Ben, and I'm here to talk to you about the process of giving and receiving feedback. So, this will be focus more on informal feedback on kind of your work and your ideas rather than a formal feedback that you might do as part of a performance review. There are many of the great sessions specifically around performance reviews, and so I didn't want to go over exactly the same ground. So this is me. So my name is Ben. I'm a solution architect at KPMG. I work primarily in the Microsoft Dynamics space, if anyone's ever played around in that, but I've moonlighted as a bit of a custom software dev and a bit as a DevOps engineer as well. I live in a small village just outside Northamptonshire in the UK, and I currently balance working at home with my wife, my two small children, and my cat. I didn't have a picture for the cat, I'm afraid. So what about you? So I appreciate we've got quite a varied audience here. So let's introduce our player characters. So perhaps you're our first character, you're a more junior developer. So maybe you're fresh out of school or university, or you're an apprentice, and you're taking the first step of your journey into working in tech. This session is designed to kind of give you the ability to maximize the effectiveness of the feedback that you receive. Maybe you're the next step on, maybe you're a more senior engineer and you're acting maybe as a lead on a project or a program, or you're a mentor to a number of different more junior engineers who are fresh into the business. So the idea here is we'll aim to kind of nurture that, help you nurture that creative spark that comes with new talent, whilst also maintaining the relationship into management as well. And finally, we have people in the management capability who are maybe a little bit further away from the coalface day to day, but want to maintain that good relationship with their technical staff and produce effective feedback and ensure that the best ideas get brought forward. So hopefully there's something in this talk for everyone. Some people may sit between a couple of these roles. I know I probably do personally, but let's start with a scenario that hopefully we're all familiar with. So as people often talk about, making software, it's a creative endeavor. It's fraught with analysis, confusion, frustration, and yes, probably sometimes even tears. But it's all worth it in the white hot thrill of the chase for that magical moment where you stand up from behind your desk, knock your coffee over and just shout, "It only works." But even when we've made what we believe is the most innovative, amazing application that the world has ever seen, it can sometimes really only be the start of the process. To make it from something that we've got as a sketch or something PowerPoint or just a proof of concept into something that can be rolled out to customers or go into a production system can seem a bit of a daunting process, especially if you're new to the industry or to your employer. We've got to battle things like corporate policies, battle hardened egos and processes and habits that have been formed over years and years of experience and process. And it can leave you thinking, I just don't even know where to start. Which of these avenues do I go down? How do I maximize the feedback on my idea or my piece of work? And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk through three mainly important ideas about how you and your colleagues can maximize the effectiveness of the feedback that you give and receive. So the three things I like to focus on are, number one is purpose. So it's really important that we understand that when we're asking for feedback, we know exactly what its purpose is so that we can give and receive the feedback that everyone is looking for. Number two is the audience. When we're demonstrating our ideas or our work, we need to be sure that the correct people are seeing it so it's correctly understood. And finally, this concept of fidelity. So when we're making a pitch of our great new idea, we need to make sure we make it at the right stage with the right level of detail so that we maximize the effective feedback that we get. So first of all, let's talk about purpose. So there was a great talk, I think, in Birmingham, which recommended a fantastic book called Thanks for the Feedback. So we're using the definitions from that book. So heads up to whoever recommended me that book. So the first type of feedback is appreciation. Now, we all want to feel wanted. We don't want to be taken for granted. We work hard. And if we're not recognized, that kind of feels bad. So a great way to boil appreciation down is to think of, boil it down to its essence, is to think of how we might give feedback to a small child. So a child might come running up to you and say, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, Mummy said I couldn't do 100 jumps in 1 minute, but I did." And the other thing you could say is, "Wow, amazing." And this actually happened. So this is a representation of me and my daughter. Small children love all kinds of feedback, but they particularly crave appreciation, especially from parents, more than any other. It gives that really good hit of oxytocin and makes everyone involved feel happy. So is appreciation just for children? Well, of course not. I think we wouldn't be breeding a very good working culture if we didn't appreciate what we did. But here is some kind of broad advice about how we manage appreciative feedback. So the first thing is, appreciative feedback needs to be kind of specific and authentic. If everyone gets massive high fives, compensation and great feedback just for coming to work every day, it kind of loses all its value. It needs to be on something very, very specific, and that gives it its authenticity. It also needs to be given in a more timely manner. So you'd be amazed how quickly people forget how appreciative they've been of someone. You may appreciate something they did one day, but by the next week you've totally forgot, and that person is just another resource to you. So really make sure we give it in a timely fashion. And one of the things is, appreciative feedback is not something necessarily that we explicitly ask for. It's something that we almost come to expect by kind of going over and above, or doing the extra hours, or solving a particular challenge. But we have to recognize that maybe due to time constraints or people crunching on projects, that it may not always be free flowing as much as we would like. So it's great when we get it, but we need to be honest with ourselves and realize that it's not always as free flowing as we would like. The one thing you can do as a sort of mentor and manager is try and make sure that if you get some appreciative feedback for someone you work for, someone who works for you or works with you, that it gets surfaced in the right places and the people it's seen to the people who matter. So I'm a line manager for 4 different people in my company. And one of the things that I'm on like a laser beam is anytime I get any appreciative feedback from any members of my staff, whether that be an email, a WhatsApp message, a message on Teams, I make sure it gets logged in our performance management system, because what will happen is if you leave that to the end of the performance year, everyone will be too pressured doing all their performance reviews and no one will remember. Do it timely and do it straight away. One of the other things we need to recognize is that appreciative feedback has a big non-verbal part of it. So all feedback has some element of kind of a non-verbal component, but appreciative feedback is probably the most. So it's very easy to appreciate someone through gritted teeth, but it really kind of loses the effect. So we need to watch how we manage our non-verbal communication when it comes to appreciative feedback. The next stage is evaluation. So evaluation is the biggest and scariest type of feedback. It's one we've come accustomed to since school. We all carry an example of evaluative feedback on our CVs. So my art teacher, when I was 16, evaluated my performance at the end of my GCSE and decided that I was worth an F. So he looked at me, he looked at my work, and F was what I was worth. Just on the side, I didn't draw these sprites, just so you know. Evaluation can be kind of quantitative and sometimes seem a bit cold compared to other types of feedback, and it has to often be quite objective. And there are 2 main types of evaluative feedback that we're probably used to working day to day. One is probably our end of year performance review, which we're all familiar with. And the second is our old friend, the code review. Now, we look forward to these as much forward as we look to a trip to the dentist. I'm sure we could all fill several volumes of text with just code review memes. And it's the same every time. It's, why am I having to defend my great work? These people do not understand my genius. And then you may find the machines don't even understand what you're doing. And often you get linting warnings and build errors and PRs rejected, and it takes you 2 months to get anything merged onto master because of all this damn bureaucracy. We need to relax. One of the reasons we can get evaluative feedback from a machine is because it is inherently objective. We need to try and sit back and take some of the emotion out of it. Notice I didn't say take all of the emotion out of it, because I think that's pretty much impossible. And when you're giving evaluative feedback to another member of staff, one of the big things to think about is this concept of candor. So candor is quite an old word. It comes from Latin, and it means either brightness or whiteness, or it can also mean to shine or I shine. But in around 1600, it adopted a new meaning. And that meaning is the state of being sincere and open in speech and honesty in expression. Anyone who has read Edwin Catmull's great book, Creativity Inc., knows that candor is at the heart of the Pixar brain trust process. And it is how they quickly evolve concept of film ideas and how they produce such great output. Candor is something they bring to the table every single time. So we need to be candid in our feedback when it's evaluative, not brutal. So we need to point at everything that's there, bring everything out into the light, but we need to do it with an empathy for the people we're speaking to. As any creator, as a software engineer is a creator, and we're very proud of the work we do. We see it as our baby. We don't want anyone pulling it apart. It doesn't seem fair, but it's very, very hard to argue with someone who's been complete, open, and candid. And emotions, well, use them well. If you think something's wrong, if you don't believe in something or you think something's wrong, then do say it. And be candid in your disagreements, but be respectful. People sometimes don't bring enough emotion into certain types of feedback, and it results in things getting lost in translation. If you say, well, I'm not sure that's the most optimal process, the person receiving the feedback may think, oh, great, it's not the most optimal, but I'll carry on with it regardless. Whereas if you more vehemently disagree, said, okay, I think that process is now so suboptimal, we shouldn't use it, then that brings the point across much more clearly. So a way of bringing empathy and candor together is to maybe look at an alternative viewpoint. So if you spot something in a piece of work or an idea that someone's presented to you that you don't agree with or you think is a bad way to go, don't say something so simple as thing is bad. Just say, okay, let's point that the thing exists, and then allow your receiver of feedback to take that next step themselves and come up with why something may be bad or it may be worth a further look. Credit for Lindsay Ellis, who's a great YouTuber, for this quote. I stole this totally from her. And the final purpose of feedback is this idea of coaching. So evaluation and coaching often come hand in hand. And many people would argue that a piece of evaluative feedback is much, much more powerful with some coaching attached. It's all part of the kind of the agile cycle of learning, doing, and adjusting. Coaching is basically how we learn. We try, we learn, we do, and we try. We get some coaching and we adjust. And just like agile, coaching should be primarily be focused on how to be better, without a strict focus without what is wrong or right. Our evaluative feedback kind of handles that for us. Coaching should take you down paths that perhaps maybe you've never really considered before. And one of the best ways of looking at this when it comes to coaching is something that comes up quite a lot, is how to solve a problem. Now, we may coach people on how to solve problems, but the problem with problems, for want lack of a better expression, is sometimes they're quite nuanced and without all the detail that may be needed to fully understand. And you may find that if you offer someone some coaching on a particular problem, because of the lack of context, you may be a bit misled or guide someone down an avenue that isn't quite correct. So when you're asking someone to give you some coaching, try and focus on a particular problem and try and present it in a way that's understandable and easy to digest. Give your coach the correct perspective. For example, a maze is much, much easier to analyze when looking top down than looking at from the side. And one of the things to remember when we are talking about solving a problem is there are in fact multiple routes we might take. So there are the dead ends. So these are the things and the wrong ways to go about things. They're almost always universally agreed. So these are your classic things like security vulnerability or a single point of failure or not using the dark theme on your IDE. It's just not allowed. But beyond that, there is the road less traveled. So your junior may have approached something differently to how you've done it in the past, but try and be open-minded and try and walk the path they walked to try and get an understanding of how they got to the result they had. You may find there's an avenue that hasn't previously been ever undertaken, that's worth investigating. Even if it isn't the direct solution to this problem, you may discover interesting new features that you can use elsewhere. Technologies change and evolve, so a fresh pair of eyes could often provide some new insight and not necessarily be blinkered by the way this has always been done. But there is the enterprise highway. So there are sometimes more efficient ways of doing things, or there's policies or regulations that need to be adhered to. And we need to be open-minded when we're receiving feedback from people who are more experienced on this. Sometimes you may find that the problem is, when you present your solution, the problem has previously been solved a different way. And we have to be aware that in organizations that this sort of stuff may happen. But it's always, and again, it's always still important to remember to question the status quo. Remember, you weren't hired just to say yes. And we have this thing called apparent credibility, which can sometimes hide a lack of understanding. So you may get some feedback to go down a particular route from someone who just seems so credible that you wouldn't dream of questioning that what their advice you've given you is correct. But often it can hide something that actually maybe they don't quite understand. I've got a great story about how apparent credibility has led me down the wrong path from an early point in my career. Don't have time to go through it right now, but you can ask me in the chat if you want me to go through it as an example. One of the things you may unfortunately hear when being coached down the enterprise highway is this. So that's not how we do things in the enterprise. And as an architect, I hate this. I'm a bit sick to death of this. Yes, we all know that when you scale something to the enterprise, it has different constraints and different regulations and has to adhere to standards that maybe you've never heard before. But I don't really generally accept this as a blind piece of coaching. I mean, imagine the enterprise changes. Imagine if you had this statement said to an idea about working remotely back in November last year. It would have been a perfectly acceptable thing to hide behind, but it wouldn't have worked. The situation we're in now is a great example of how the way we've done things in the past need to change depending on a number of external factors. So don't necessarily just accept that's the way we do things, because if they can tell you why, that's fine. But if they can't, maybe there's another avenue to pursue there. I mean, if we did everything the enterprise way, we'd end up with things like this. So anyone who's ever done a technical interview may have done something with FizzBuzz. FizzBuzz is a game where you count up from one, and you have to replace certain multiples of certain numbers with the words fizz or buzz. And someone here has done a great repo, which is an enterprise edition of a FizzBuzz implementation. And if you delve into some of the details, there's great ones like integer string return a factory, which I think is absolute genius. So the enterprise is good, but we need to always be open-minded in the ways that we look at problems. Where this can go a bit wrong is where we get purpose mismatches. So when you are looking for one particular type of feedback, but you actually inadvertently receive another type in return. For example, if you burn the midnight oil and merge a particular complicated PR onto the master branch to push it into production, and you send an email to your boss, what you probably don't want first thing in the morning is some cold evaluative feedback about what exactly is wrong with it or where you should come next. What you probably want is just some appreciative feedback to say, great, thanks for that, good job. It can put you in a pretty bad mood. And also, for example, your junior may not be happy with a thanks for this, but they just need help getting to the next level. Try and be clear when asking in feedback what the purpose is. So if you need coaching, just use a phrase like, can you provide me some guidance on this, rather than just, does this work? And when you're giving the feedback, try and loop back at the end to ask, was that what you were looking for? It gives you a chance for your person who's receiving the feedback to clarify or re-clarify, and it gives you a chance to provide better feedback. Yes, feedback on feedback is a very real thing. So next thing I want to talk about is the audience. So we've identified the 3 types of feedback that we need, but who are we going to present this to? Now, targeting the right people is really important. Your idea or concept may be the greatest thing since the internet, but doing a live demo to the catering team is not really going to get you the result that you want. And some advice here is maybe to try and get it across multiple groups of people. So I think a lot of people will just go to their manager in the first instance, just because that's the most obvious route. But if you spread your idea across a number of different groups, you get a lot of different perspectives, especially because certain groups, not mentioning names, tend to be of a particular demographic. And having a wide range of viewpoints will get you a better view about where your idea may go. And also might stop people trying to take credit for your idea if more and more people know about it. And remember that audiences have different interests and drivers. So your peers may be interested, who are playing in the same sandbox as you day on, day out, may be interested in how your idea works. Oh, it's great, show me how it works. Your mentors or maybe your leads are more interested in what your idea can do. And your managers are probably more interested in the why. So why is this so valuable? What can I do with this? And finally, we've got this concept of fidelity. So the fidelity of your idea will mostly depend on what you're trying to present and the audience that you're requesting feedback from. You need to know whether you can draw it as a detailed engineering drawing or whether I can just write something out in crayons. If you're presenting a concept for a new encryption cipher to your information security team, you probably need a higher level of fidelity than just presenting a new concept for a picture gallery to your social media team. It's all about getting the right detail at the right time. So in my experience, don't try and show code snippets to senior management. Really, sometimes they can only think in PowerPoint. So we're here. We've got our great idea. We've got some great feedback from our peers and our mentors. We've pitched the fidelity just right. Everyone's standing behind me. I've got everything I need. We're ready to go. So just one little aside before we finish. And that's what I like to call the death and taxes caveat. Sometimes, despite your idea being well formed and having great fidelity and having the will of the people behind it, everyone thinking it's absolutely great, there is a partner or a senior stakeholder, a customer, or a person high up in your own organization who just says no. And this happens just like death and taxes. And sometimes you've just got to roll with it. My advice in this situation is consider whether this is a battle you would think is worth investing your time in. Because sometimes even if the client or the manager is being completely illogical and irrational, it's not worth your effort because you're not going to get the outcome that you want. Maybe think of it as, rather than no, think of it as not now. And think of it as giving some time back for you to go out and be even more awesome. Just get some written evidence that you try to lead them down the correct path, and then go and grab a cup of tea and get on with your day. Now, there is one caveat to this. If the answer to no, a caveat to the caveat, if the answer to no is condone any sort of illegal or wholly immoral behavior, then maybe that fight is worth taking and maybe worth going even further up if you think it's necessary. Certainly, I work for a regulated company, and it's something we're taught a lot. So that's a pretty downbeat way to end this talk, and I don't want to do that. I want to finish on three kind of key messages to try and emphasize the point of accepting feedback, but trying to get the best out of it. And the first one is, as I said, well, you weren't hired just to say yes. You were hired for your insight and your input, your creative thinking, and your ability to kind of bring the company forward. If we all just agreed with what the status quo was, we wouldn't advance, we wouldn't innovate, and we wouldn't get the result we want. The second one is creativity isn't just for the experienced. So people think that you need years and years of experience to come up with a great idea, and it's not even worth going for feedback until you've had that grounding in reality. And that's just not true. Great ideas come from people who are experienced all the time. You just need a blank slate and a complete lack of a predetermined way of going. And finally, which brings on the title of this talk, you have taste, you have ideas, you have drive, you have things you believe in. Don't be afraid to use it. And thank you very much. And I welcome your feedback.